The words landed like a knife I hadn't seen coming. Ruth, today will be your last day. That's what Dominic Hayes, the new managing partner, said as if he were announcing a change to the lunch menu. 25 years of my life dismissed in a sleek conference room with polished wood and sterile smiles. I remember staring at him, the practiced sorrow in his voice, the manila folder he slid across the table. Business decisions aren't personal, he said. But how could it not be personal when the business was my life, my identity, my sacrifice? My name is Ruth Pearson, and until 10 minutes ago, I was the Senior Director of Client Relations at Franklin & Associates, one of Boston's premier legal consulting firms. At 58 years old, I was the oldest in the department, the one who had stayed through late nights, corporate restructurings, and mergers. I had helped build this firm from a modest office with 17 clients into a powerhouse that dominated the industry. I had been the face clients trusted when they signed contracts worth millions, and in return I got 2 months severance and a security escort. I remember the way the security guard hovered awkwardly as I packed my desk. I slid photos of smiling clients' charity galas and holiday parties into a box. I wrapped the crystal paperweight Arthur Franklin, the founder, had given me for my 20th anniversary. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Winters, CEO, of our biggest client, Ruth. I heard troubling rumors about changes at F&A. Call me ASAP. I looked up, and there was Dominic in his glass office already on the phone spinning his lies. He thought relationships could be reassigned with a memo. He didn't understand that trust wasn't transferable. As I walked out of that building, humiliation burned in my chest. I'd spent years ensuring clients felt irreplaceable. Now I was discarded like an outdated brochure. I went home and sat in my apartment, surrounded by the silence of loss. My inbox filled with polite condolences from colleagues, some genuine, others perfunctory. My LinkedIn exploded with views. Nothing draws attention like a public downfall. 3 days later, Arthur Franklin called me. His voice, usually warm, was tight. Ruth, I just landed from London. I heard the news. This wasn't authorized by me. My emotions tangled into anger and betrayal. Well, it happened regardless, I told him. He admitted Dominic had pushed it through while he was overseas, sidelining him in his own firm. He asked if I'd consider coming back, but I couldn't. Dominic had branded me legacy fat. I could still hear the words. Once a company marks you as dispensable, there is no coming back. But something Dominic never understood was this: I wasn't just an employee. I was the architect of relationships that built Franklin and Associates. And those relationships didn't end with a termination letter. Within a week, calls poured in, not from recruiters, though there were those too, but from clients. Catherine Winters called again, her voice sharp with anger. Tell me you're not gone. That girl Melissa tried to explain my own business to me yesterday. I want to know where you're going, Ruth, because I'll follow. She wasn't the only one. Douglas from Archer Pharmaceuticals, Belinda from Summit Financial, the entire team at Westridge Manufacturing. I hadn't sought them out, but word had spread and loyalty shifted naturally. They weren't loyal to a firm's name. They were loyal to me. I met with a headhunter, Catherine Goldstein, who told me bluntly, "You're the talk of Boston right now. 3 firms want you to are creating roles just for you." She slid me numbers that made my breath catch, double the salary I'd earned after 25 years. Dominic thought I was too expensive, but my value had only multiplied outside the walls he controlled. Meanwhile, Franklin and Associates was unraveling. Blogs whispered about client unrest, defections, chaos inside leadership. Arthur called me again, desperate this time. Clients are furious, Ruth. They're demanding meetings. Douglas is pulling out. Catherine is threatening to walk. Come back, I'll make you partner, full equity, more autonomy than you ever had. For a moment, the offer tempted me. Partnership was the one thing I'd always deserved but never received. But I saw through Arthur's desperation. He wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to save himself, clinging to a firm that was bleeding from the cuts Dominic had inflicted. I remembered the humiliation, the escort, the way they'd stripped my dignity in 10 minutes. No title, no raise, no offer could erase that. So when Arthur said, "We need you back," I finally said the words I never thought I'd have the courage to say no. Business decisions aren't personal, remember, but what happened next, the way the clients revolted, the way the firm crumbled from the inside. The way I found myself holding the cards they thought they'd stripped from me proved that sometimes betrayal plants the seeds of unexpected justice. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, coffee meetings, and whispered confessions from clients who had once trusted Franklin and Associates with everything. They didn't just want me back in their corner, they were outraged at how I had been treated, and they made it clear with their actions. Contracts were terminated, retainers were withheld. Within 3 weeks, nearly 70% of the accounts I had nurtured for decades were either gone or hanging by a thread. Dominic hadn't seen it coming. He thought firing me would be a clean break, a surgical cut to streamline operations. But clients aren't spreadsheets. They're people. And people remember who picked up the phone at midnight, who flew across the country to solve a crisis, who stayed in boardrooms until dawn negotiating deals. I wasn't just an account manager, I was their anchor. I'll never forget the morning I received an email from Catherine Winters. Franklin and Associates just lost us $12 million in delays. We're terminating our contract effective immediately. Ruth, call me. I'd like to discuss next steps with you personally. My hands trembled as I read it. Not from fear, but from the vindication I had been craving since the day Dominic shoved that manila folder at me. And it wasn't just Catherine. Archer Pharmaceuticals announced they were taking their portfolio to another firm. Westridge Manufacturing, one of the oldest accounts on Franklin's books, pulled out after Melissa, the young associate Dominic thought, could replace me, misfiled regulatory documents, and cost them weeks of production. Every lost client was a knife to Dominic's carefully polished ego. The firm's reputation, once bulletproof, began to fracture. Rumors flew through the industry Franklin and Associates had lost its touch. Their leadership was unstable. Their clients were in open revolt. I wish I could say I didn't enjoy it, but I did. I enjoyed it more than I should have. There was a cruel, sharp satisfaction in knowing the man who humiliated me was now drowning in the consequences of his arrogance. Still, revenge alone wasn't enough. I had choices to make. Multiple firms had extended offers, and each came with more money, more authority, and the promise of respect I'd been denied for so long. But something inside me hesitated. Was I just going to slip back into another high-rise office, another endless cycle of late nights and shallow praise? Or was it time to build something of my own? That question haunted me, until one evening when I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by the remnants of my old life client thank you notes, photographs from conferences, plaques from award ceremonies. They all had one thing in common. They were addressed to me, not to Franklin and Associates. The loyalty had always been personal. And if it had always been personal, maybe it was time to make the business personal too. I called Catherine Winters the next morning. Her voice was sharp, impatient, but underneath it all, hopeful. "Ruth, where are you going? Don't make me chase you across half of Boston." I took a deep breath. What if you didn't have to? What if I built something myself? There was silence on the line, then a low chuckle. "You'd do that? You'd finally run your own firm." My heart pounded. "If I did, would you come with me?" Her answer came without hesitation. "I'd move my entire portfolio tomorrow." That was the spark. One conversation, one promise, one sliver of courage. Within a week, I had 3 clients pledging to follow me wherever I went. Within 2, I had the beginnings of a firm, not a large one, not yet, but one built on trust, loyalty, and a refusal to let arrogance erase 25 years of sweat and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Franklin and Associates was in freefall. Dominic's memos grew more frantic, his tone less confident. Colleagues whispered to me over coffee that morale had collapsed, that Arthur regretted ever letting Dominic touch the firm. And yet through it all, I stayed silent. I didn't gloat publicly. I didn't post triumphant updates on LinkedIn. I let the silence speak for me because silence can be louder than any scream. But make no mistake, I was preparing. Quietly, carefully, relentlessly. And when the moment came to reveal what I had built, it would shake the very foundations of the empire that tried to cast me aside. The first weeks of building my own firm were chaotic, sleepless, and terrifying, but they were also exhilarating in a way I hadn't felt in years. I rented a modest office space above a bakery in Cambridge, the kind of place where the smell of fresh bread filled the hallways every morning. It wasn't the glass tower of Franklin and Associates, but it was mine. My name on the lease, my vision guiding every decision. I started with nothing but a laptop, a box of files, and the loyalty of clients who believed in me more than the men who once signed my paychecks. Catherine Winters was the first to move her portfolio. Her presence alone was enough to draw attention, and once word spread that Westridge and Archer were also shifting their business to me, the momentum became unstoppable. My small office buzzed with calls, contracts, and a steady hum of possibility. At night, when exhaustion threatened to crush me, I'd remember the humiliation of that final day at Franklin and Associates. Dominic's dismissive tone, the security escort, the manila folder that reduced my career to a line item. And I'd push through because I was no longer fighting to survive his betrayal, I was fighting to build something he could never touch. Meanwhile, Franklin and Associates was collapsing in slow motion. The news trickled in through colleagues who still cared enough to keep me updated. Dominic had called an emergency meeting after Archer's withdrawal, ranting about client disloyalty and threatening to sue for breach of contract. His tantrums only deepened the cracks in the firm's image. By the third month, they'd lost not only 70% of their clients, but also half their senior staff. Even Arthur, once the firm's steady hand, was said to be retreating from public view, embarrassed by the monster he had allowed to take control. And then the phone rang one evening, Arthur Franklin himself. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual authority. "Ruth," he said quietly, "I should have stopped this. I should have protected you. The firm it's falling apart. Dominic is gone. He resigned yesterday. We need you back. As partner. Full control of client relations. Whatever you want, it's yours." For a moment I closed my eyes, the temptation washing over me. Partnership. Recognition. The one thing I had dreamed of for decades finally dangled before me. But then I remembered the hollow conference room, the look of pity from the receptionist, as I was escorted out, the way they had let one man discard me like a worn-out chair. I let Arthur's words hang in the silence before answering. "Arthur, do you know what Dominic told me the day he fired me? He said business decisions aren't personal. Well, this is my decision, and it is personal. I won't come back." The line went quiet. Finally, Arthur exhaled. "Then I wish you well, Ruth. Truly." When I hung up, I realized that was the closure I didn't know I needed. For 25 years, Franklin and Associates had been my identity. But now, standing in my small office with the scent of bread rising from below, I understood I had outgrown them. Within a year, my firm had expanded to 3 offices across Massachusetts. We weren't the biggest, but we were trusted, respected, and feared by competitors who once dismissed me as legacy fat. My team was small but fiercely loyal, built on respect rather than intimidation. And every time I signed a new client, every time I walked into a meeting where people looked at me instead of through me, I felt a quiet surge of vindication. Franklin and Associates. By the time the industry reports came out, they were barely a shadow of what they once were. A handful of minor clients, a tarnished reputation, and whispers of bankruptcy. Dominic's name had become a cautionary tale, the executive who thought numbers mattered more than people who underestimated the power of loyalty. But the greatest revenge wasn't watching them crumble. It was standing in my own office, free, respected, and finally undeniably valued. The official obituary of Franklin and Associates appeared in the Boston Business Journal 18 months after Dominic first shoved that manila folder across the table. The headline was brutal in its simplicity. "Once powerhouse firm declares bankruptcy after client exodus." I read it on a rainy morning in my office, a mug of coffee warming my hands. My staff, 10 strong, now each one hand-picked for their integrity and brilliance, had already forwarded me the link a dozen times. Some celebrated openly, their laughter echoing down the hall. Others shook their heads in disbelief. I just sat quietly, letting the weight of it sink in. 25 years I had given them, and in the end they had destroyed themselves in less than 2. Dominic had vanished from Boston. His LinkedIn abandoned, his reputation shredded. Arthur, I later heard, retired in shame, his legacy forever tainted by the chaos of those final years. I should have felt triumphant, And part of me did. But another part of me felt only sorrow. Sorrow for the colleagues left behind, for the friendships fractured, for the good work that had been buried under arrogance and greed. But I couldn't dwell on their ruins. I had built something new, something alive. My firm, Pearson Consulting, had become a beacon for clients disillusioned with hollow promises and corporate games. We didn't just manage accounts, we cultivated partnerships. Every new contract signed was a reminder that relationships outlive resumes, that trust cannot be bought or fired away. One evening, as the sun set through the tall windows of our new downtown office, Catherine Winters stopped by. She leaned against the doorframe, watching my team laugh around a whiteboard scribbled with ideas. "You did it, Ruth," she said softly. "You turned betrayal into a beginning. Not many people can say that." I smiled, my chest swelling with a mix of pride and humility. "I couldn't have done it without you, Catherine. Without all of you who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." She shook her head. "We didn't follow you out of pity. We followed you because we knew the truth. You were the heart of Franklin and Associates. Now you've built a new one stronger than before." Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night I walked through the quiet office, touching the backs of chairs, glancing at the framed photos of my growing team. I thought back to the moment I was escorted out of Franklin's building, humiliated and broken. If only that woman could see me now. She would know that endings, no matter how cruel, can become doorways to something greater. Here's the lesson I carry with me, and the one I want to leave with you. Never let someone else's blindness convince you of your worthlessness. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals are the universe's sharpest nudges, pushing us where we never would have dared to go on our own. If you've ever been cast aside, if you've ever been told you were too old, too expensive, too expendable, remember this. Your value is not defined by the people who fail to see it. It's defined by the loyalty you inspire, the work you pour your soul into, and the courage you summon when everything falls apart. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't watching others crumble. It's standing tall in what you've built from the ashes, knowing they can never take it from you again. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever turned betrayal into a new beginning? I'd love to hear your story too.